How does one of the biggest car makers on Earth run a Formula One operation without owning a team, without paying the billion-dollar entry fee, and without building a single engine? That's not a riddle. It's happening right now, in plain sight, in a garage most fans barely glance at. And the answer isn't a scandal or a secret handshake. It's something stranger, a rule the sport wrote itself, sitting quietly in the back of the FIA's own book that Toyota read more carefully than anyone else in the paddock. For years, Toyota looked at Formula One the way a careful buyer looks at a house they can't quite afford. The company left the sport in 2009 after spending a fortune and winning nothing. By most accounts, north of $3 billion across 8 seasons, for not a single race win, and the price of return has only climbed since. When General Motors wanted in for 2026, the existing team set the price of a brand new slot at $450 million, split between them purely for the right to exist on the grid. Buying an established team outright runs well past $1 billion, and building a 2026 engine from a blank sheet is a gamble measured in hundreds of millions, with a real chance it lands at the back. For a boardroom as conservative as Toyota's, one that already lived through the most expensive failure in the sport's history, every front door was bolted shut and priced to stay that way. So Toyota stopped looking at the front doors. If you want to understand the most quietly clever move on the current grid, the one rival team principals are only now starting to talk about, stay with this and get subscribed. Because what Toyota found isn't a scandal. It's something much harder to argue with. A completely legal way to be in Formula One without ever officially entering it. Look at the 2026 grid, and you'll see the team that makes this work. It's the one wearing Toyota's colors, but running someone else's engine, carrying an American owner's name, and a Japanese giant's branding at the same time. Most of the paddock filed it away as a simple sponsorship. A big check, a logo on the side pod, nothing more. That red isn't wrong so much as it's looking at the wrong thing entirely. The logo was never the point. The point was the access the logo bought, and the rulebook that made that access legal. To see how the whole thing fits together, you have to start with the piece almost nobody outside the sport has heard of. It's called TPC, Testing of Previous Cars, and it exists for a reason that has nothing to do with Toyota. Modern Formula One barely lets teams test. In-season running of the current car is essentially banned, and preseason amounts to a handful of days. That left a problem. How do you keep a race crew sharp and give young drivers real mileage without the current car? The FIA's answer was TPC, a provision letting teams run older machinery, at least 2 years old, away from race weekends. In 2026, that means running a 2023 spec car. Most teams use it to shake the rust off their drivers and rehearse their pit choreography. It's routine. It's boring. It's exactly the kind of rule nobody thinks twice about, which is precisely why it was the perfect door. Because here's the thing about TPC. Running it is expensive. You rent an elite circuit, you truck the car and the crew across a continent, you manufacture spare parts for an old chassis, you burn through costly tires. For the biggest teams, it's pocket change. For Haas, the smallest, leanest operation on the grid, a team that has built its entire identity on spending as little as possible, it was a luxury it could barely afford. The allocation existed on paper. In practice, much of it sat unused, because Haas simply didn't have the budget to run it. An unused allowance, sitting inside the smallest team in the sport. That was the vacancy, and Toyota walked straight into it. The proposal, when it came, was elegant in how simple it looked. Toyota would fund the TPC running Haas couldn't afford. The circuits, the logistics, the whole program. On the surface, generosity. Again, the rich partner picking up a bill the poor one couldn't. But look at what Toyota asked for in return, because that's where the real exchange lives. Toyota decided who sat in the car, and, quietly, who stood around it. Its drivers were the part everyone saw. Under a newly created development program, Toyota put its own racers in the cockpit, endurance and junior talents like Ryo Hirakawa, Ritomo Miyata, and Sho Suboi, logging real kilometers in a genuine Formula One car. To the cameras, it looked like a tidy driver academy, a car maker giving its young Japanese drivers a taste of the big time. And it was that. But the drivers were the visible half of a deal whose real value was standing on the other side of the garage wall, holding a laptop. Because while the attention followed the men in the cockpit, Toyota was doing something far more valuable with the people outside it. It embedded its own engineers, its own data analysts, its own mechanics into that trackside operation. These were the hands on the car and the eyes on the telemetry. Weekend after weekend, test after test, Toyota's factory staff were learning the one thing money genuinely cannot buy in a hurry: how to actually run a Formula One car. How to correlate track data to a simulator. How to read tire temperatures across a stint. How to operate, as a unit, under real conditions. They weren't renting a driver's seat, they were building a race team's muscle memory, using someone else's license to do it. And here's the part that makes it clever rather than shady. None of it breaks a single rule. Toyota isn't an official Formula One entrant. In the eyes of the regulations, it's a technical partner, a sponsor with a technical agreement, a category the rulebook treats as harmless. The engineers in that garage are employees of Toyota Motor Corporation, not of the race team, which means their salaries, their hours, their expertise sit entirely outside the cost cap that squeezes everyone actually competing. Think about what that means. The cost cap was the great equalizer of modern Formula One, the rule that stopped the richest teams simply outspending everyone. And Toyota found a way to pour its resources into a Formula One operation while standing completely outside that limit. A car maker was training a full trackside crew on live machinery, funding a rival team's development, and the rulebook had no box to put any of it in. Now, this is the point where the honest version has to correct the tempting one, because it's easy to oversell what TPC actually allows. It is not an unlimited loophole. Since 2025, the FIA has capped it, around 20 days a year, tight mileage limits on race drivers, period-correct parts only, and explicitly not a channel for developing this year's car. Third parties like Toyota taking part have to be approved by the FIA. This isn't something being hidden from the governing body. And the cars are 2 years old, so nobody's stealing next season's aerodynamic secrets off an obsolete chassis. What Toyota is extracting isn't illegal data. It's something subtler and long-term more useful: operational readiness. And in Formula One, that's the thing money struggles to buy fast. New teams don't fail because they can't afford parts. They fail because they've never done it before. Because the first 2 seasons are a brutal public education in reliability, pit stops, strategy and correlation, paid for in crashes and lost points. Cadillac is about to walk into exactly that trial by fire as a genuine newcomer. Toyota, if it ever chooses to go further, would arrive having quietly served that apprenticeship years in advance. The muscle memory already built, on someone else's car, at someone else's circuits. The ability, when the moment comes, to already know how to run. But a trained crew with no factory behind it is just a group of skilled people standing in a car park. And this is where the second half of the plan quietly clicks into place. Because Toyota wasn't only using the track, it was rebuilding the building. Haas has always been the outsourced team. It leaned on Ferrari's simulator in Italy to develop its setups, and on an Italian constructor to build much of its car. It never owned the expensive machinery a real factory runs on, which is exactly why it stayed pinned to the back. Toyota looked at that gap and started filling it. As part of the partnership, it funded and installed a driver-in-the-loop simulator directly inside the Haas base in England, brought online around the middle of the 2026 season, the team's first of its own. And the people calibrating it, writing the code that tells the digital car how to behave, correlating it to reality, are Toyotas. None of this severs Ferrari, and it's worth being precise about that. Haas still runs Ferrari power, still uses Ferrari's wind tunnel, still calls that relationship its foundation. But every new capability Toyota installs, every workflow it brings in-house, tilts the center of gravity a little further toward a warm, waiting facility in Cologne, Germany. That plant is the ghost in this whole story. A full Formula One grade factory, wind tunnel and all, built for Toyota's failed team of the 2000s, and never fully shut down. For over 15 years, it has quietly built the company's rally and endurance machines, the bones of a Grand Prix operation, kept breathing long after the last Toyota Formula One car stopped racing. Reporting around the partnership points to Toyota gradually pulling more of Haas's engineering toward that facility over time, carbon design and manufacturing among the capabilities that could migrate there. The simulator in England, the manufacturing muscle in Germany, the trackside crew trained through TPC, laid side by side, they don't look like a sponsorship. They look like the scattered components of a factory team, assembled one legal piece at a time. Which leaves the single hardest, most expensive part of Formula One, the engine, and the most elegant move of all. Toyota simply decided not to build one, Toyota's logic here is almost cold in its precision. The 2026 power unit is the hardest engineering problem the sport has posed in a generation. A near 50-50 split between the combustion engine and a huge electrical deployment, where mastering battery heat and energy recovery is where seasons are won. Building that from a blank sheet costs a fortune and might still fail, so Toyota lets someone else take the risk. Ferrari spends the hundreds of millions perfecting the hybrid. Ferrari's engineers burn the budget solving the packaging, and Toyota's people, standing in the same garage, simply watch how a top-tier power unit behaves in the real world, legally, as the partner running the car, learning the shape of the problem without paying to solve it. Let's be careful here too, because this is where the story tends to run ahead of the facts. There's no evidence of anything stolen, no secret being cracked, no rule being broken. It's proximity, not espionage. A company getting a long, close, legal look at how modern Formula One actually works, on someone else's budget. That's not a crime. It's just an extraordinary bargain. Stand back and look at the whole machine, because only from a distance does the shape become clear. A trackside crew, trained on live cars through a rule meant for shaking off rust. A simulator, installed and controlled, inside the team's own walls. A manufacturing base, warm and waiting, in Germany, and an engine problem someone else is paying to solve. Toyota assembled the 4 hardest, most expensive pieces of a Formula One team, and did it without buying a team, without triggering the cost cap, and without building the one thing it's most famous for building. Here's the honest tension underneath all of it. Every individual piece is legal, sanctioned, even mundane. The TPC rule is public. The sponsorship is public. Toyota has said plainly it has no current plan to build an engine or take the team over, and Haas insists it runs its own affairs. You can read this entire thing as nothing more than a big company helping a small one, and a paddock reading intent into coincidence. But you can also read it as the most patient entry strategy the sport has ever seen. A full operation assembled in the blind spots of a rulebook designed to keep newcomers out. Both readings use exactly the same facts. That's what makes it so hard to dismiss. So here's what I genuinely like to know from you. The FIA built a billion-dollar wall to control who gets into Formula One, and one of the biggest car makers on Earth may have simply walked around it, using the sport's own rules as the map. Is that brilliance, or is it a failure of the people who wrote the rules? And if it works, if a company really can build a Formula One team without ever officially entering one, how long before everyone else stops paying at the front door too? Tell me where you land in the comments.